I'm Evan Gudrestad, an instructor of application and web development at Rankin Technical College. Today I'm going to continue through the Microsoft ASP.NET documentation. And so all I'm really doing is walking through all of these tutorials step by step. I've kind of live streamed this kind of learning journey that I'm taking. Some of it, definitely a lot of it is new. Some of it is review for me. However, I'm going through all the docs in effort to make sure that I know what's out there and I know the different options for myself and my students. And so we've kind of finished up the HTTP API apps and kind of went through those. And today, starting up on the interactive client-side Blazor apps. And so I've definitely worked with Blazor in the past, but certainly does not make me an expert in the sense that I have a lot more to learn. And so I'm going to go through the Microsoft docs here and see what I can learn. And then bring that to my students. And so I've already poked around through these docs, and if you do the same, you will quickly realize that it's a rabbit hole that's pretty deep. And so as you get into the overview here, what I wanted to do today is kind of go through this overview and then build your first Blazor app. And so this is where I'm going to start. And so it's not a ton on the agenda. However, after that, if we go back a little bit, the next thing, now this build your first Blazor app is the same place we just were. So this Blazor hosting model, we'll see if I get into this, which very quickly takes me down this rabbit hole, and we get into what they call rendering modes, which I need to get there. But to start from the top, we're going to click on this overview, .NET Core Blazor. And so here's what I know about Blazor. React, obviously extremely popular in the JavaScript world, and this was Microsoft's response to build a front-end component library where you build components for front-end apps. And so over here, we learned how to build RESTful APIs, so kind of build that back end that it can interact with the database and provide access to resources. And then now we're focusing on the front end. When we're building Blazor, you can see UI components, user interface components that take advantage of WebAssembly for good performance. When they say near native performance, native means when you're building Android apps, you're working historically with Java, and I believe in iOS it's Swift. And so Swift if you're building Apple or iOS apps, Java if you're building Android apps. And so these are native languages. So if you're building native mobile apps for Android or iOS, the native language is always going to give you the best performance. But what this is talking about when it says near native performance, it's referring to the not Swift level performance on iOS, but near native. It's good performance near that of what Swift could offer, or Java on Android. Actually, it was Java. Now Kotlin. Kotlin is now what is used for native Android apps. And so if you want to build cross-platform apps, that's where you would bring in .NET Core. .NET Core, where you can build cross-platform mobile apps that work near native performance. Okay, overview. So again, this is a high level now. This is .NET 9, so the latest version of .NET Core Blazor. And I'm just going to walk through this docs, and then again, what I'm going to do is complete the tutorial, and maybe a couple of tutorials today. Again, see what I can learn, see what I can bring to the table for my students in the future. Welcome to Blazor. Front-end web framework that supports server-side and client interactivity in a single programming model. So there's this concept of like server-side rendering, SSR, or in other words, the work being done by the server and client side work. So basically, work needs to happen. Is it going to happen on the server? Is it going to happen on the client? And Blazor can work in multiple modes, multimodal, multi-modes in a single programming model. So it's pretty neat because up until now we couldn't create front ends with C#. So now we can actually bring C# into the front end. So that's kind of, to my knowledge, the first time that we can use C# on a front-end library. Very similar to JavaScript and React, using JavaScript on the front end in a library. Again, server-side and client-side logic with .NET. Render the UI as HTML and CSS. Okay, so even though we can work with C# and we can code in C#, it would be converted. Just call it converted. I think they have a special term for it. From any C# you might write, it would be converted or transpiled, I believe is the term, into HTML and CSS. So it's being converted into HTML and CSS. Build hybrid desktop and mobile apps. Again, to talk about building a web application, yes, it can build a web app. It can build a desktop app, yes, and it can build a mobile app. So one tool for building front ends in all these different devices, right? Whether it's a desktop, whether it's a cell phone, etc. Okay, using .NET offers advantages. So here's the selling points. Write C#, can improve productivity and maintenance. Again, if you're familiar with C#, you don't have to learn another language. You can use the bunch of .NET libraries that are out there. And so again, if you're familiar with C#, whether it's the random class built in C# or whatever those, the convert class in C#, all these different libraries that are out there. And so, for example, one library that's pretty neat is Entity Framework, right? So Entity Framework is how we can use C# and interact with our databases. And Entity Framework can play nice with Blazor. Okay. Benefits from the performance, reliability, and security. So this is a Microsoft paradigm. So you're getting a pretty giant tech company behind you to kind of vouch for good performance, reliability, and security. And we're going to use tools like Visual Studio Community and Visual Studio Code. We can use deployment tools such as Docker. Okay. So we're going to get to this build your first Blazor app components. Again, just like in React, we have components. And Blazor is also based on components, just like in React. A component is a element of a UI, such as a page, dialog, or an entry form. components are C# classes. So at the end of the day, a component is a C# class that can define rendering logic, handle user events, nested and reused, shared and distributed. So, component, I think of a component just like in HTML, you've got a heading tag, and when you code an H1, it gives you a result, and you can reuse that H1, and you can nest that H1. So you can nest it, you can reuse it. Now these components can also include their events. So like if you make a user, if you make a component and it has a button click, it has a button in that component, and you can tell it, well, what do you do when you click that button? So not only is it the look, but also the behavior, which is the handling user events. And then, by the way, when you click a button, what should the browser do? Should something appear? Should something disappear? It talks about rendering logic is what's being rendered on the screen, drawn on the screen. Okay, and once you have a component, you can distribute those in packages or libraries, so you can let other developers reuse your components. So the component class, again, which is written in C#, is written in the form of a Razor markup page with a .razor file extension. And so you can see here it's got something very similar like an H1, but we've got some new tags like a page title, right? This is the Razor markup page. So this is Razor syntax. And again, the naming, I can't get over sometimes. Blazor versus Razor. I don't know where they come up with these names. So we have a Razor markup page, which is some blend of C# and HTML. When I think of Razor markup, I think of a blend of HTML and C#. And so when you see this @ symbol, you're going to see more C# looking. Like here's a C# variable called message, and then we're putting that message inside of an HTML paragraph. And so that's Razor syntax with a .razor file extension. Components in Blazor are formally referred to as Razor components, informally as Blazor components. Okay. Formally, Razor components, Blazor components. Okay, so we're going to call them Blazor components. Razor is a syntax for combining HTML with C#, designed for developer productivity. Razor allows you to switch between HTML and C# with IntelliSense. So we're getting some code assisting with IntelliSense. Blazor uses natural HTML tags for composition. The following markup demonstrates a component that increments a counter when a user clicks the button. So we've got a button, they click me, on click, increment count. Here's my method, increment count. Takes a variable up by 1 and then displays that variable, current count, on the screen. So that's going to be your, this is like the template that you get out of the box. Components rendered into a memory, an in-memory representation of the DOM, right? So the document object model is the JavaScript way of understanding and updating the HTML that's on your page, called a render tree. So in JavaScript or in React, they got the virtual DOM. Over here, they got something similar called a render tree, which is used to update the UI in a flexible and efficient way. Seems really similar, where they do like a diff, and they look at the difference between the render tree and the DOM and figure out what needs to be updated on the web page. Blazor web apps provide component-based architecture with server-side rendering and full client-side interactivity in a single solution where you can switch between server-side and client-side rendering models and even mix them in the same page. So this is cool because when you get into like React versus some of the other front-end frameworks like Next.js, React is known for its server-side rendering. To get things to render on the client side, you have to use a different framework like Next.js. And so this Blazor allows you to switch back and forth, even on the same page, which is pretty cool. Blazor web apps can quickly deliver UI to the browser by statically rendering HTML content from the server in response to the request. The page loads fast because UI rendering is performed quickly on the server without the need to download a large JavaScript bundle. Blazor can also further improve the user experience with various progressive enhancements to server-side rendering, such as enhanced navigation with form posts and streaming rendering of async generated content. Blazor supports interactive server-side rendering, interactive SSR, where UI interactions are handled from the server over real-time connection with the browser. So this seems like a hybrid between client-side rendering and server-side rendering, with this real-time connection between the browser and the server. Interactive SSR enables rich user experience like the one would expect from a client app, but without the need to create API endpoints to access server resources. That's interesting. Interactive SSR enables rich user experience. It seems like an interesting feature. Page content for interactive pages is pre-rendered, where content on the server is initially generated and sent to the client without enabling event handlers for rendering controls. The server outputs the UI as part of the page as soon as possible in response to the initial request, which makes the app feel more responsive to users. Blazor web apps support interactivity with client-side rendering that relies on .NET runtime built with WebAssembly that you can download with your app. When running Blazor on WebAssembly, your .NET code can access the full functionality of the browser and interop with your JavaScript. Your .NET code runs on the browser's security sandbox with the protections that sandbox provides against malicious actions on the client machine. So interactive server-side rendering is one mode, and client-side rendering and just old-fashioned server-side rendering. So we got these different modes that it's really talking about. And if I kind of back out here, and these render modes are described in more detail. Server-side rendering, interactive server, interactive WebAssembly, which I believe this is the default static server. So where it is rendered, in other words, where the processing happens to draw the component. So let's back out. Back out. Blazor apps can entirely target running on WebAssembly in the browser without the involvement of a server. So this is obviously fully on the client without a server. For a standalone Blazor WebAssembly app, assets are deployed as static files. Once downloaded, standard Blazor WebAssembly apps can be cached and be executed offline as progressive web apps. Okay, so different rendering modes here with Blazor is really what we're talking about. And again, there's a deeper dive on those rendering modes. And then Blazor Hybrid, which a native client app means an app that runs whether it's on iOS or Android. Blazor Hybrid enables using Razor components in a native client app with a blend of native and web technologies for web, mobile, and desktop. So this is that cross all these different devices, cross devices and different platforms, desktop, mobile, web. Code runs natively in the .NET process and renders web UI to embedded web view controls using a local channel. WebAssembly isn't used in hybrid apps. WebAssembly isn't used in hybrid apps. Hybrid apps are built with .NET MAUI, so this is something that's brand new, which is cross-platform framework for creating native mobile and desktop apps with C# and XAML. So this is actually something that we are starting to introduce in first year curriculum with .NET MAUI. Blazor Hybrid supports WPS and Windows Forms to transition from these old technologies to .NET MAUI. Cool. Build your first Blazor app. So this is just a quick, let's install the app and try it, create a component, modify a component. Pretty basic tutorial. So I'll follow through this real quick. Build your first web app with .NET Core using Blazor Visual Studio Code. All right, so I'm going to use Visual Studio Community. And create a new project. And Blazor web app. So I filtered C# and I filtered web. Now if I search for Blazor, you see a bunch of different templates. But Blazor web app is the one I'm looking for. Click next. See you tomorrow. This is just going to be called Blazor app 1. That's fine.
Is it in person?
Yeah. And where this is at on my hard drive, I'll just drop this in a chapter 6 folder because that's where my class is. Blazor app 1. And let's see what settings. I'm going to choose .NET 9. I'm good with HTTPS. I'll leave the default render mode. Server, WebAssembly, or auto server and WebAssembly. So I'll choose none. Include sample pages. Yes. And let's spin it up. Okay, Solution Explorer, Program CS. Program CS is the entry point for an app that starts the server and where you configure the services and middleware. Let's pin this. We've got components. App.razor is the root component for the app. App.razor is root. This is where you're going to see the HTML5 markup with some other components. Here we can see some routes. Routes.razor configures the Blazor router. So this is for navigating from one link to the next. Front-end routes. The pages directory contains example web pages for the app. So the home, hello world, and we got a weather app that gives you some fake weather forecasts for the next 5 days. They have a similar templated code for that web API backend. Blazor app CS proj, which is typically, if you click this is your CS proj file. Defines the app project and its dependencies. Can be viewed by double clicking the project node in the Solution Explorer. So this is the CS proj file. The launch settings JSON. Inside of properties, launch settings. Defines the different profile settings for the local development environment. A port number is automatically assigned and saved in this file. So here's our port numbers for HTTPS. I believe it's 7,000. For HTTP, yeah, it's 5,000. So I'm going to run without debugging. Just run the template. So here's our hello world that we saw. Click on weather, and these are the two components that we looked at. Hello world and weather. And so you can begin to see, here's your .razor file. Page is /weather. So that's the route /weather. And if I look at our router, I was able to piece all that together. Route data, route view, route data, route data. Using main layout. So here it's loading our routes from routes razor. Okay. So again, this is our home page, which is Razor syntax, page title. Now, I don't have a counter, and maybe this has changed because now it's a weather forecast, and I'm not sure. There's no counter here. So if I look at main layout and nav menu layout, we can actually piece this together and make our own counter, I think. So let's copy that and paste href counter. So we're navigating to a counter, and this will say counter, and this is bootstrap icon list nested nav menu. Let's go to our bootstrap icons and get a plus sign. So here's our bootstrap icon. Let's just try that guy. Okay, it doesn't like my icon, but it should take me to /counter. Cool. So now I'm going to make a component pages, right click, add new item, razor page, empty. Now this is in I'm gonna be careful. I'm gonna click general, web, ASP.NET, razor component. There we go. This is going to be called counter.razor. Okay. So /counter is the page. We're setting a render mode to interactive server. Page title is counter. And we already looked at this code. Code block and a couple buttons. The required endpoints are not mapped on the server, but the required. Okay, so I think this is probably in program CS. It's telling me very specifically builder map razor components. Back to that. So I think basically I need to, in program CS, let's see, right here, app, right here, that's the line I need. App map razor components. to enable that support. Go back, refresh. I might need to, I'm going to reboot. Take it down, reboot. Now, let's see if I was missing anything else. Okay, add Razor components, builder build. And notice I had that line in there twice. Still getting the error. Let's try an old copy paste. Copy, paste, boot. See if there's something I was overlooking. Interesting. So now let me just Control Z. Okay. So I almost wonder, as I'm battling this, I'll take that off. And see if I can just land. Okay, now I can land, it's just not going to work. Okay. So at least it landed there. Bring that back. And again, added an add interactive services right there. I want to do that. Yeah. Now this generally means, I wonder if I need, let's try again. Now, another thing as I'm messing with this, I'm just going to add a new project. Both server side and client. This template can be used for both. Blazor server app. I'm going to try a different one. Try the one with WebAssembly. Blazor 2. Okay. I almost wonder if .NET 9 changes some things on me. So I'm going to change this to Blazor 2. And this one has the counter and the weather. So looks like a program CS. That'd be crazy if it didn't compile out of the gate, out of the template. This looks a lot different than what I've seen before, but if I boot that up, it's going to have that counter, and it has the weather. And so I just picked a different template, and while I'm at it, I always like to explore these different templates. Add new project. Okay, so this one, server side and client. This one's WebAssembly, so it's more of just the client side. These two are just server apps. So this one's both. These two are server side. This one's client side. And client side empty. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm not going to get too tripped up on this one because I chose that template that can go both server side and client side. I might be trying to do something that I just chose the wrong template. And so I'm not going to throw a fit on that right now. Close it down, and close all tabs. And if I go to the Blazor app 2, this one was built using that template that was WebAssembly. Program CS looks a little different. Little layout here, no big deal. More layout, we kind of saw that. The correct bootstrap icon. Okay, let's open up home.razor. It says add a counter. So there already is a counter component. And now run it, so our home page should include a counter. There it does. Makes sense. That's the old. Okay, now we go into the counter and modify it. Component parameters are specified using attributes or child content, which allow you to set properties on the child component. Define a parameter on the counter component for specifying how much it increments with every button click. Add a public property for increment amount with a parameter attribute. Current counts plus equals increment amount. So now we're going to increment by 3 every time we click the button. In home.razor, update the counter element. So I got to go to the home.razor. We could set the increment amount to 4. So that's going to pass 4 into our increment amount. We could set the default to 1. Incrementing by 4. Okay, that kind of finishes that one. And the suggestion is to build a Blazor to-do list app. So let's back out, black out. And what's nice, once I come back here, again, there's so many links on this Microsoft documentation. If you go to the ASP.NET Core Blazor tutorials, build your first Blazor app is what we just did. Then we go to the to-do list app, then a movie database app, Signal R with Blazor, and hybrid tutorials. And I'll go through this one. It doesn't look too long. Let's close. This tutorial provides basic working experience for building and modifying a Blazor app. This is kind of where we started. Again, where we've ended up is right here, right here. Which looks awfully similar to that one. Now this one says it was updated in November of last year, so 3 months ago. This one doesn't give me that information, so I'm going to do this one. Okay, create a to-do list, modify Razor components, use event handling and data binding, use routing. You'll have a working to-do list app. Download and install, create a Blazor app, create a Blazor web app named to-do list and a command shell. Now this does a terminal window, and so I'm going to go Tools, Package Manager Console. Let's see. This might not be the right terminal window. So of course, doesn't add it to the solution. So let's open folder in File Explorer and see that we go up to the solution. Right click, add new project, Blazor, WebAssembly standalone app, to-do list. Okay, add a Razor component. Pages, right click, add Razor component. To do or D. At page to do at render mode interactive now this says interactive server. It's got to be the wrong template again. Because this is, as I started typing this, interactive server render mode. Or maybe it's the difference between versions 8 and 9. So try again. Choose that one. To do list 2. I'm going to choose .NET 8. Try that. Uh-huh. Yeah, see I changed it to 8 and it's, let's see if it builds. Nope. And that's in Blazor app 1. Oh, maybe that was a mistake I made. Blazor app 1. Okay, one or more Razor view or pages were found, but the project is not configured to add Razor support for MVC. Back out here, create a new solution, new project. It's funny that that gives me red squigglies until it catches up. Okay. Right click, add razor component. Okay, everything's playing nice. Yeah, it still doesn't like that render mode. Okay. I'm using this WebAssembly one. Again, learning experience for me. I'm going to delete this. Choose the server template. Since it says interactive server, maybe that's what I need. Solution, add, definitely Blazor server app. Make sure I got everything patched and up to date. Yeah, it's the default Blazor template in .NET 8, so Blazor web app. So I think I've just been making a mistake in choosing the wrong templates. Just the default Blazor template is what I need. So as I go through this, okay, I'm gonna get things patched up and kind of continue this. Next time, because I gotta do a few other things here around work. So I'll stop this one here. I'll get everything patched up